We're studying Ecclesiastes, and a couple of weeks ago we began looking at this book of wisdom, and we thought about the very relevant and pertinent question that this book puts before us. I've spelt it right this week. Is there life before death? Is there life before death? Good question. We saw that this book is a very relevant book for today, a very relevant observance of our lives. In this book, the kingly teacher, a man who has all the power, health, wealth, women, intelligence that anyone could wish for, says that true satisfaction is not his, it's eluding him. Everything he grasps is slipping through his fingers. And that's not only true of him, it's true of everyone who's come before him and all that will follow. Bleak house, you might title Ecclesiastes, if you were thinking of our friend Dickens, as we were last week. And thinking of old friends, let me remind you again how Trevor Knight expressed his thoughts on the introduction to this book. The book of Psalms teaches it's possible for one of God's people to reach the heights of joy and praise. Ecclesiastes shows it's possible for one of God's people to backslide to the depths of morbidity and gloom. Bleak indeed. Now in chapter 1, having introduced us to what is really a reality check on our lives, this poet, this teacher, probably Solomon, king of Israel, he set his stall out very clearly. He's made an opening proposition, and he's saying life is fleeting. It's here today and it's gone tomorrow. And this proposition continues in other phrases he uses in the opening chapter. He comes to an early conclusion. All over the world, people live harder and harder, and they burn out or fade away sooner and sooner. And yet at the same time, as he expresses in the book, occasionally there are these great benefits of common grace which all mankind can experience. There are blessings and joys in the life, especially of believers in God. And so life, the teacher says, can seem like a chasing after the wind, and then you die. But within your life, God gives enjoyment and work and health and wealth and pleasure and even the very spirit and breath you are breathing now. And these, the teacher challenges us to see, and it is a challenge, are two realities in our lives that we have to hold out and reckon with and wrestle with if we're going to live wisely, of course. If we're going to live wisely, the teacher, as we saw last week, is saying we're to have right expectations about life and a right perspective on our lives lived under heaven whilst we're on earth. Life under the sun all over the world is also lived under the heavens. And that's a perspective that rightly sees that God is sovereign. He is ruling over the world. And you must reckon with that if you're going to live or if you're going to thrive in life. So, we've entered chapter 2 and we discover that there are two areas of life that the teacher wants to explore. What he's doing here is he's putting life under the microscope. Have you got a microscope at home? Some people have, maybe, where you slide a slide under and you can look at something much more clearly and see it blown up and you understand it better. Life under the microscope. But before we look at the two areas of life in chapter 2 that I want to examine, there's a subject that's also relevant from chapter 1, which has already been mentioned. Something that I couldn't overlook, and so we have to consider it even though we're in chapter 2, because this is something that brings blessing to our lives, but is also a thorn in our lives also. What am I talking about here? Well, the teacher has mentioned it. As a teacher, I'm talking about education. Education. There was a former prime minister, and that needs some qualification these days, doesn't it? He said his 3 great priorities for his new government were education, education, education. It's a good line. And he made a good point. In Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verses 16 to 18, the teacher mentions his own pursuit of knowledge. And now, here, in the 21st century, it's fair to say that knowledge and education, rightly, have come to be seen as one of the great hopes of mankind. And I have nothing against having a good education. I hope we all would agree it's a great blessing to our lives, something that can truly transform a person's life. Absolutely. However, it is true, is it not, asks the teacher, that gaining more and more knowledge in and of itself, does it necessarily, he asks, produce a better or a good life? That's the question he's throwing out. And these verses seem to say otherwise. It's not all we need to consider. What does he mean then by these verses? I think he's saying some of these very straightforward and simple things. The more we know, the more we realize how much we don't know, which is close to what a former American politician once said. And this brings us back to the teacher's earlier proposition that life under the sun needs to be understood under heaven. A life lived under heaven. You see, mankind may think that we can know all things. We think we can know all things without God so often. But that's empty, says the teacher. It's a chasing after the wind. Friends, we have to reckon with our mortal state and our frailty as fallen human beings. You owe your breath to God. You owe your brains to God as well. To even think that we don't need God is only possible because God's given you a brain to think. You see how much we don't know, even though we think we know everything? He is the supreme creator and maker. He possesses all knowledge. We don't. He does. And ultimately, as one writer puts it, the teacher's thinking looks like this. What's the point of cramming your head with more and more knowledge when you and I are going to occupy a grave next to someone who just didn't bother learning anything at all? We're both ending up in the same place, is what the teacher's saying. And that's very true. We need to hold that in our heads. It's a thought worth pondering. You say, well, yeah, especially after exam season, I'm with you there. What was the point of that? Well, I'm sure it will do you good, but remember, it's not all the good that this life can give you. Secondly, what the teacher is perhaps pointing to here is that the more we know, the more awareness we have of our own misery. Knowledge can often bring misery the more we understand. Why? Well, the size, if you like, of life's biggest problems are explored and they become better understood. But that only leaves us frustrated, maybe. We have a sense of how little we can do in the face of such big challenges. How does he conclude these things? He says, for with much wisdom comes much sorrow. I think he means that. Oh, we think we're great, but we realize the more we know how frustrating the limits of our knowledge are. The more knowledge, he says, the more grief. So much for education. But please hear me right. I want to say something about education. I want to say something about teaching. I want to say something about teachers. I want to say something about Christian teaching and Christian teachers in particular this morning. Because this is where I think there is an opportunity for a great difference to be made. Let me say this. From a purely worldly viewpoint, one that admits no God, trying to fathom the biggest questions in life only leads to this very reductive understanding. Conclusions in life are all trying to be understood from the inside out. But that's not good enough, and it won't work. However, for someone who believes, a Christian teacher, shall I say, that there is indeed a God, there's this possibility, great possibility, of answers being understood from outside in as God reveals his truth to you. And that enables that Christian teacher to have a sense of value and a purpose in life that is so much better for those children in their care. There's a cash value, one writer calls it, to having that kind of view. The difference can be seen in the way a Christian teacher approaches their whole calling in life. Here's a quotation I want to bring you from Harry Blameyer's book. It's The Christian's Position on the Modern World. And he is seeking to show that a Christian is someone who must have what he calls a double allegiance, both to this life as we see it, which we share with all mankind and the ungodly, but also an allegiance to the life of faith, the life that may be unseen, we might think. And this approach must be applied in our Christian thinking to both nature, life on earth, and life under God or under the heavens. You need both of these thoughts. And here's a quotation from Harry Blameyer's book. Let me read it. The Christian teacher will apply this double vision both to his pupils and to his subject. He will learn to look at his pupils not only as children of men, but as children of God, fellow beings with souls to save. And he will learn to look at the subject he teaches not only as part of the fabric of human knowledge, but also as related to those truths of Christian revelation which sum up our knowledge of life and its meaning. That's helpful. Surely, education is a good thing. But listen, the teacher in Ecclesiastes is saying to us very clearly this morning, it is not everything. It's a good thing indeed, but ultimately, it's not a lasting thing in life. Now, moving into chapter 2, we're given cause to see that even with a biblical framework and with the immense good that we must acknowledge that education may bring, it isn't able to provide the deep satisfaction and longing in life that we crave for. So it's not at all surprising the teacher moves on and he turns his attention now to other subjects. In chapter 2, he turns to pleasure. That's how this chapter opens. Can this fill the gap? He's asking. He sets out these words in verses 1 to 3. Come now, I will test you with pleasure to find out what is good. We live, don't we, in this sort of world, a world of ever-increasing consumerism and pleasure-seeking. Do whatever you like, whatever makes you feel good, says the TV or your neighbor or your colleague. Shop till you drop, definitely, says your TV, doesn't it? But it must surely be clear, as the teacher points out in this chapter, that though having pleasure and enjoyment are good things, often they can never become the thing. They must never be the sole motivation that gets you out of bed in the morning. What gets you out of bed in the morning? Just your own pleasure? I hope it's not just that. You're to have a meaningful, productive life. Is pleasure all there is? Therefore, the teacher is saying it isn't, because pleasure, like everything, is fleeting. It's here today, it's gone tomorrow. And though it can be good in many different ways, it's not a lasting thing. We are to remember then that pleasure is not our key thing in life. And pleasure really is a byproduct of other things. We need to not hold pleasure as the goal to be achieved in every part of our lives. We've got things the wrong way around there. Pleasure is a byproduct of activity. You have a friend round and you talk, and there's pleasure in the outcome of that conversation, but the activity was the thing. Without that, there was no pleasure. We can't focus just on pleasure. That's true in music and sex and reading and cinema, all activities that are sort of designed to bring pleasure. But that activity must be engaged in. That's the important thing, living a productive life, not just pleasure seeking at the end. To base our lives purely and solely on pleasure, that which fades, so you need more and more of it. He says it's chasing after wind. It's elusive. You can't hold on to it, despite what the TV or anyone else tells you. If earthly pleasure alone was life's great answer and goal, then you and I are sunk, because we can never hold on to it or have enough. You feel empty. Pleasures pass you by. You crave more. You think you'll get enough. Friends, that is godless pleasure seeking in and of itself. Godless pleasure seeking. But seeking God, I'm bound to say, he who is completely true, as we saw briefly with the children, he alone can satisfy deeply and completely and forever. He is all we need. And so we must reckon with these things. But the teacher isn't done yet with his examination of life under the microscope and meaning in this world. He now turns from education and pleasure in verse 4 right through to verse 11. You probably can't read it unless you're very young on the wall, but take my word for it, those are verses 4 to 11. He speaks now of work. Work. I think I've mentioned before from this pulpit, when I was doing A-level English, learning Larkin poems. He has a poem called Toads, which is all about work. He likens work to a toad, an ugly thing. And he says at the beginning, why do I let this toad work squat on my life? And the poem describes how work is on his head, pushing him down, and it's horrible. There we are, it sticks, doesn't it? He's speaking here about work, that activity which sweeps up many people in the vain belief that this is the answer to their existence. If pleasure is a dead end, what about projects and planning, says the teacher. I put myself straight into that. Maybe that will bring lasting joy and satisfaction. Now, for a rich king, as he was, projects and building was a given. He could throw himself into this great work, and he did with great creative activity. It's fair to say that much that he did, gardens and waterfalls and beautiful planting, that must have brought pleasure to himself and to many. Nothing wrong with having a big, great garden. I would love it. But surely this is because we see beauty in things that are made, because God made all things. And we, like him, want to be productive if we're made in his image. So he throws himself into creative activity, which is good in and of itself. We reflect our Maker in being productive makers of things. That's right and good. We are like him in improving this world. But once again, having expressed all that, in verse 11, he says, even here, there are limitations and ultimately a gainlessness in all that I'm doing, a frustration in my toil. Why? Well, verses 22 and 23 help us. When I surveyed all that my hands had done and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless. He still has this troubling sense of grief and pain in his toiling. You see, what is going on here is the niggling thought that all our desire to build, to achieve, to make and create, it's really a desire to assert who we are, to assert ourselves in this world. We think we must find purpose and meaning in us and what we do, because we're sinful, fallen creatures, making ourselves in our own image alone, even though we're made in God's image. There's a fight here and a tension going on. Listen to this tension, even expressed in the life of this actor, John Thor. He was Inspector Morse, amongst many other things. He made this honest admission about work once. Listen to this. He said, I suppose I'm a workaholic. Sorry, John, you're dead. Sorry. I suppose I'm a workaholic. Don't speak ill of the dead. It's all about needing to work, to give yourself some importance, to prove that you exist. If I have a month or two off with nothing happening, I get fidgety, nervy, edgy. It isn't insecurity, because I know there is work coming up. It must be, I suppose, that I need work so as to be able to say to people, look, I'm here, I exist. I think he said great truth there in the striving and toiling all of us know something of in our lives. Friends, if that's you, by the way, work is all your life. Think about what you're doing. Work is good, but you can make a good thing the thing. You can make it and anything else into an idol, the Bible would warn us. And that's not good for us. Another reason the teacher gives for the folly of working more and more and faster is that we never live, he says, to enjoy the full benefit of what we've worked for. Is that a good outcome? He says, no, it isn't. All that I'm doing is going to be left to someone else who comes along later, and they might be a fool and squander it all. That keeps him awake at night. And there's a lot of truth, if it's Solomon, in what he says. Look at what he says in verse 18 and 19 of chapter 2. I hated all the things I toiled for under the sun. The things he'd made, he hated. Weird. Because I must leave them to the one who comes after me, and who knows whether that person will be wise or foolish. Yet they will have control over all the fruit of my toil, into which I have poured my effort and skill under the sun. This too is meaningless. Boy, there are so many lessons for life in the scriptures, aren't they? If only people would read the scriptures. It's here. And so he explores this. He's explored all these three things: education, pleasure, and work. And he's found them all to be cul-de-sacs, going nowhere, bringing him back to square one. A chasing after the wind, ultimately empty. So you're asking, is there any ray of sunshine? It's cloudy this morning after unbroken sunshine for weeks. Is there any sunshine going to break through today? Well, they do say later it may do, but that's by the by. Is there sunshine in this chapter? Is it going to break through? Yes, that's the answer. He speaks now finally of this word. I want to leave you with this word. It's gratitude. Gratitude. The artist Dante Gabriel Rossetti once said this: the worst moment for an atheist is when he is genuinely thankful but has nobody to thank. And that is a sentiment I think we can glimpse in chapter 2 of Ecclesiastes. Look at the final verses of this chapter. I'll put them up there. Friends, there are many things in life which we can and we should enjoy. I hope you can hear me saying that from here today. Good food, good company, work can be good, family and friends, the list is endless. There is genuine satisfaction to be found in many good things which God has given. But listen, there is to be an altogether richer satisfaction when you recognize who has given you these good things rightly in your life. You are to see these things which can be an endless chasing after the wind, as good gifts from God, which you are to handle rightly, not wrongly, not making them the thing only in life. And the value of these things is not to be seen residing just in themselves, you understand. Those things are good, but they're there to lead us to the one who has given us those things in the first place. That ultimately is their purpose. Then, only then, you are able to see these things which make up your lives, not just like empty, floating, meaningless things in a disconnected sea of uncertainty in all your activity. They become emblems of grace, signs of God's loving kindness, which he has put upon you and shown toward you, and that should make all the difference in the way you view this world and in the way you experience these things that we've been thinking of in our lives. I mentioned G.K. Chesterton, I think last week or the week before. He's so wise. He says this: the chief idea of my life is the practice of taking things with gratitude and not taking things for granted. That's what the teacher, I think, is concluding at the end of Ecclesiastes 2. Seeing food, drink, work as gifts should totally transform our view of the universe that we live in. It should allow us to know that everything is conceived in a truly personal way. Work shouldn't be a drag, but a vocation, a calling. Food. Some people just eat to live. I'm not in that camp. Food shouldn't be seen just as a result of some meaningless biological activity. It's a kind gift from God for us to enjoy rightly. And then the whole of creation becomes infused, if you look at things this way, with this wonder and delight. Everything we have comes from a good God. I won't abuse or neglect what God has given to us graciously. That's the perspective, again, that we're to have, the right perspective that we need. There is a heaven we're living under. It's not all here, folks. And there's a life to come. There's a God who has given us all things to enjoy, and there's a God we are answerable to and are responsible to. That's to be the approach in life which transforms our living. So yes, with the teacher we can agree, life is a breath. It's like those bubbles that children blow, and you try and hold them in your hand, and they're there for a moment and they're gone. That's life. That's just telling us that there's another life to come. One that's going to last forever, not one that's going to fade in your hand. And for a believer in God, that's a life that will be shared with our Heavenly Father. And that gives us the secure knowledge that if we're heading to that home, his home, one that he's prepared for us as our good shepherd, then there is much, much in this life that makes the living worthwhile, even as we're waiting now to go up there one day. Amen.